Welcome everyone to the May edition of Backstage Community Session, especially for contributors. If you were here last week, you would have got Suzanne live from Kubecon. So that was exciting to see. For today, we have a couple of news. We have Jen and Francesco to talk about some special goodies for Backstage, but I'll let them speak about it. We have a special guest contributor who was nominated by the backstage.io/nominate form. So we'll have a little bit of chat with the contributor. And we have 3 demos. We have Tim from American Airlines to demo ArgoCD plugin, excuse me. We have Daniel from VMware to demo their Kubernetes OIDC authProvider. And from Discord, just today, we have JBA Dew to show their observability plugins. You folks, please say hi in the chat so that I can make you co-host so that you can share your screen. But first, Jen, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Apologies for the frog in my throat. It's 7 a.m. for me, and I haven't spoken to a human being yet. But it's great to see you all and wonderful to be on the community session as per usual. I did want to share some exciting news today, so I'm just going to share my screen really fast. If you were in the adopter session last week, you can definitely, can everyone already see my screen? I'm sorry, I've got great. Okay, perfect. And is it full screen or is it just a Google Slides situation? All right, great. I will pull this up a little bit bigger if I can. Well, so just to make a long story short, if you were in the adopter session last week, you already heard this awesome news that we are going to be hosting BackstageCon. And I mean Spotify, Roadie, and VMware are sponsoring a co-located event at the Kubecon North America event happening in Detroit, Michigan, the week of October 24th. So we're still working out the logistics of the actual day of the event, whether or not that will be on the Monday or Tuesday prior to Kubecon, which begins on the Wednesday. But the registration and CFP site for BackstageCon will be live in a few weeks. And if you are interested in joining the program committee, please reach out to the listed Backstage Marketing @Spotify email address. So we're going to be, with regards to the CFP, there's going to be a variety of different types of talks, be those panel discussions, lightning talks, technical workshops. And so there'll be a array of different session types that you can submit for. So we encourage any and all submissions and as many times as you want. But we also, we're really looking for discussion around best practices. What have you learned? Particular technical topics. Where have things not gone so well? And we really want this to be community driven, which is in part why we're really asking for the community to participate on the program committee if possible, which does involve reviewing all of those CFPs and voting and helping to build the content. So it's a fair amount of time that we're asking for anybody who wants to be on the program committee. But please do raise your hand for both the CFP and the program committee if you're interested. And we're really looking forward to reviewing all this great content and for BackstageCon in October.
So exciting that this is finally happening, Jen. And I'm also personally glad that this is not called PSCon, which a lot of folks were asking for. So my personal thanks on that. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, BackstageCon is on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Next up, we have Francesco to talk about special interest groups.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Let me provide a little bit more context of what we are doing and why. And let me start from something that happened. I don't remember exactly. I think it was before Easter, or probably before. Anyway, if you remember the unconference, or for the one of you that was not there, that wasn't there, it was an initiative driven by the community to have conversations around Backstage. Lots of feedback were about how we can contribute. I mean, probably most of you would like to contribute to some minor, major features, or they are thinking about new feature, but how your idea fits in the overall strategy of Backstage. Are we, do you think you are contributing accordingly with the enhancement, with some conflicting with someone else, maybe on the direction of some plugins, the core system, blah, blah, blah. And to address all of this, that you have been very loud and clear. We need to find a way to better coordinate the contribution. And this is where it comes, this initiative to play, because our idea has been and is to follow some good example and successful initiative in other projects. For example, I quote here the Kubernetes environment, and being part of the CNCF, we cannot avoid to copy or be inspired by Kubernetes. And because they have so many contributors, because they have so many people that wants to contribute on the various stuff, what they create is they create this concept of SIGs. So SIGs means special interest groups, and it is mainly a collection, a regular meeting where regular in time, so plan and schedule meeting at, we are thinking to each other week, where and all the meetings are focused on one specific topic. So each SIG is dedicated and focused on one specific topic. For example, let's say catalog. And so if you have an idea of how to contribute on the catalog topic, but again, we will see that we are thinking to more SIGs than this, and you struggle to understand, or you want to check if your idea is a good idea, is something that it is going accordingly with the direction of the entire catalog feature, you can join the SIG, share your idea, we can have a conversation, maybe progress together on this, and finally have this contributed and accepted as part of the initiative. So this is the overall context. This is the reason why we are doing this and the problem that we want to address. But being a little bit more practical, I would like to show you something again more practical in this direction. So let me share for 1 second my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So here is the GitHub repository, github.com/backstage/community. You recognize here some information about the community, but what you can see, there is a SIGs folder. If you click on the SIGs folder, you will find there an initial set of information to introduce and describe what the SIG is. You have some FAQs, so for example, how to join a SIG, and I mean, how to create a new SIG and things like that. And you can already see one initial SIG that we are planning to have. And this is very much about the catalog, but we have ideas and initiative to launch a second one pretty soon. It will be more along the path of the technical documentation. So as part of the dedicated foldering, we have a README file explaining a little bit more about the catalog SIG. In this case, it is the catalog SIG, but we will see also in other area, in other topic. For example, you can find a sort of rule when we plan to have the meeting. Initially, we are thinking to dedicate a bi-weekly meeting, so one meeting each other week. We will have a link to the meeting. For the moment, this is not working. We will have a link to the notes. So if you won't be able to join one SIG meeting in particular, you can be aware about what's happening, which conversation in each. In a public note. We think to use a Google document, but it could be that we prefer Markdown directly available here. We don't know yet. We will decide together. There is a rough agenda, a standard agenda, but nothing that is preventing to add, remove, or change the topic. And there is also a Google Calendar, just to be sure that you can add this to your own calendar. The SIG has also some contact. We plan to have a place also in Discord, and we have also a sort of leadership team that is defined by organizers and tech leads. The organizer are more facilitator of the initiative. For example, in this catalog SIG, I will be there being a product manager. I'm very interested about this. And Freben, one of the core maintainers, we will help in facilitating the event. But we have also some technical leaders to support the technical conversation. For the moment, they are the backstage maintainers, but nothing prevent you guys to be part of all of this. So this is only our way to start with an initial and see and learn, of course, from the initial one. We have also a scope about the SIGs, and again, we will learn during the journey, of course. So let me stop here because I don't want to talk too much as usual, because I think that I'm providing you a little bit of context of this. But if you have any question, feel free to raise now or ask me also offline. Looking forward to collaborate with you. If you have some idea related to the catalog, let me know, and even better, check this page to see the first meetings. Again, we will start gently. We are not going to shout this information because we want to grow in time. This is something that we need to start committed, but of course make it taking off in time, because of course we want to coordinate the contribution as much as we can, of course, with the unique goal, growth, the contributions, and of course, the capabilities of the product. I don't know if you have any question.
Thank you, Francesco. There is one question. When is the first meeting? Do we have a date for that?
So good question. Not yet. The honest answer is not yet. So my recommendation is to check the page that I was sharing. Again, we don't plan to do a lot of noise to launch this initiative, and this is why we are telling to you guys, because this is an adopter session. So you should expect news in 1 or 2 weeks maximum. Again, the Google Calendar, the initial notes if you want to add your contributions, and the final date. But I think that within 1 month, we will start with the first, hopefully in a couple of weeks. My recommendation is to check the page, but of course, ping me in Discord via email. Probably most of you, I recognize lots of friendly faces. So contact me and check the page, and we will start from there. Again, we will not shout a lot about this because we want to see how, we want to grow and make it and start with the proper pace, of course.
Definitely makes sense. And if you already have added the Backstage community sessions calendar, the 6th meeting would appear over there. So, and once we have a date, we can fix what day of the week this is going to happen. Thanks for the question, Mark. If you have more comments or questions about SIGs or this initiative, feel free to post in the chat or reach out to Francesco and other maintainers. Thanks, Francesco. And with that, it's time for my favorite part, is the contributor spotlight. And for that, I hope you have joined the session. Let me check. Are you here? Guilherme Oenning from Dublin, Ireland.
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
Hey, good to see you. Sorry for the confusion that this session does not happen on backstage.io live, but you're here. Good to see you. Tell us more about you, and congratulations for being nominated for Contributor Spotlight.
Hi. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. I think this is definitely my first time on the session. So about me, yeah, my name is Guilherme. I work on the platform engineering team at ESW. It's an Irish-based company, a global e-commerce platform. And I think part of my contribution started when we decided to adopt Backstage. And for us, and I suppose a lot of teams have gone through this, our company's, I think, 8 years now, and we start with big monoliths, and with the growth of the company, we move on to more teams, and then started on the journey to microservices, and now we have probably 300 or something components on our platform. And a big part of the confusion now is the ownership of those components, and when there's a problem, who you talk to. And I think previously what we used to do is just go through the GitHub history for the Git history and see how this person actually contributed to this project. So maybe they own this, and then you go talk to that person. No, they actually just contributed to that, right? So we decided to adopt Backstage primarily for the ownership. And I think one of the first hurdles we saw is that it had a native integration with GitHub and GitLab, Bitbucket, and some other source control systems, but didn't have it with Azure. And that's when I decided, okay, let's see how complicated it is to actually create one. And I think the good thing is that because it's a monorepo and there's a lot of plugins already, you can just essentially get some inspiration from existing integrations. And then that's when I decided to start creating the discovery for Azure. And then we started growing the adoption of Backstage, and then we are now using it for Kubernetes. And then again, there is a native integration for Backstage with AWS and Google, but it didn't have one for Azure. But again, just copying for the same principles and applying that to Azure. And now we have this integration between Azure and Backstage, where you can authenticate without credentials, essentially. Yeah, I think most of my contribution has been around the Azure, and we're going to grow. And like we have a big backlog of stuff we want to do in Backstage. And it's primarily bringing back Azure resources, Azure functionality, and expose those in Backstage. So I expect some more contributions around that space on the Azure side.
That's music to a lot of our ears. But tell us more about, I think the community is always interested in knowing how other folks are using Backstage in their organization. So tell us, you mentioned ownership being one of the things that Backstage helps you solve. What other areas are you working upon inside your org that Backstage can help you?
Yeah, the first plugin we installed was the Tech Insights. So we have a lot of company-wide adoption and initiatives. So I remember seeing one of the videos from Spotify where they're using Backstage to track the adoption of Python 3. And that is exactly what we needed for in our organization. We're moving from .NET version 3 to .NET version 6, and we have all these components, and we have a deadline on the migration, and we want to know which services are falling behind, and we need to have a look on those. So we now use Tech Insights essentially for everything we are doing. We used to do with spreadsheets, so it was a big mess. It was always spreadsheet flying around on emails and get people to manually update those, and now it's completely automated. Every day, just Tech Insights getting new information and displaying this on Backstage. So Tech Insights was the second one. It's probably the one we use the most. We're always adding new stuff there. Kubernetes it's another one. And next, we want to explore something around event catalog. So we have a lot of system using events in Kafka, and we have now hundreds of events, and it's really difficult to know which events we have, what data we have on those events, who own those events, which components consume those. So this is an area that we want to start exploring if this can be a good fit for Backstage as well.
Nice. And lastly, Backstage gets a lot of new contributors every week. And since you are an old timer now, do you have any tips for them, or are there any challenges that you want others to be aware of when contributing for the first time?
I think in terms of tips, I would say the fact that it's a mono repo, it's really helpful that you can just look at other plugins and see how they do. So sometimes you want to do something and you know how to do it, but there's probably another plugin that is already doing it. So you can get some inspiration from those. The other thing we do a lot is we first develop things inside our Backstage repo. And then once we're happy with that, we remove anything that is company specific, and then we can make those open source. That helps speed up the development process, because I think one of the parts where I still struggle with is having both Backstage, the GitHub one, the open source, and our private one, and develop plugins. And like, you know, the linking with Yarn, that part never work with me, so I have to manually copy and paste some files. So that's part that I struggle with. I
can imagine that. And yeah, is there anything else that you want to say to the community or address in general?
I would say just keep looking at the amount of PRs and new contributions. So pretty excited to see where it is going. I'm sure that there's a lot of new things coming that we're going to be able to use and hopefully contribute back to the community.
Hopefully, yeah, a lot. So thank you for joining. It was great to see you, and see you around on GitHub and on Discord.
All right, thanks for inviting me.
Next up, it's time for demos. So let's just get right into it. Timothy, are you around?
Yep, I'm here.
Take the stage. You should be able to share your screen.
All right. Just a moment. Looks like I may have to add permissions really quick, so I may have to rejoin. Give me just a moment.
Yeah. Zoom makes you do that for the first time.
Okay, I'll be right back.
If I only had elevator music on the tip of my fingers, I would have played that now. Oh, he's here.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so what we're showing off today is a plugin that we recently contributed back to Roadie's repo for ArgoCD. Previously, they had a...
So sorry to interrupt him. Your video is off if you're interested.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Just thought I would let you know. And
there we go.
Apologies.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we have previously used Roadie's ArgoCD plugin for like viewing ArgoCD information, but we wanted more functionality to where we could actually do additional things. We wanted to be able to create ArgoCD endpoints, delete them, sync them, things like that. And then most importantly, we wanted it to be available as a scaffolder action so that while we're scaffolding a new application, we could go ahead and create the projects within Argo and set up the continuous delivery for that project so that teams are already ready to go from the beginning. So I'll just show a little bit off here. So like we go into our create process. Some of you guys have seen our internal implementation before. We call it Runway. just get things refreshed. And I'm just going to grab one of our React templates and just going to fill some of this out. And we'll just create a backstage test demo for today. We'll go to our next step, and then you can see, like, as part of our scaffolding process, we're able to select a non-production cluster while we're choosing the app. And I'm going to choose the experiment section and test demo backstage. We'll use the rest of the defaults. Go ahead and create an ingress. And as we go to our next steps here and I hit create, you're going to notice, like, we've got a number of things going on here. One of these final steps right at the end is that we're going to create the ArgoCD resources. And this is actually the action that we contributed back plus the backend within the ArgoCD plugin. So this will take just a second to kind of go through. Give it a few more seconds. So we'll get registered. And now we're calling the backend. So like I said, this goes ahead and creates the information. If we go to the repository, that actually then shows us that it's been created. And then we've got the folder set up automatically for tracking with ArgoCD. If we look here in the catalog, we'll have a URL here shortly. So like this URL automatically is set up so that we're able to go. It actually takes about 4 or 5 minutes for it to complete the build and all of that. But soon this URL will be live because that ArgoCD was done. The way that we did it is under actions. Like if you go to your create/actions, we now have this create resources step that's available. And anybody can add this to their software template and create the Argo project and get everything set up so that it's ready to track and start the continuous delivery. If you're wanting to read more about it, like I said, we contributed this back to Roadie. So within their Backstage plugins repository, there's a folder here for scaffolder actions, and it's the scaffolder backend for ArgoCD that we created. Really quick demo, but I mean, we could wait for this to come up. It won't be up yet. Like our Akamai should just throw an error here saying that it's not ready. Because it takes a little bit to build. Yeah, so not quite ready because it hasn't completed the build yet. But that's the crux of the demo. I don't know if you guys want to go through code at all. This is actually my first community session that I've been able to join.
We have 5 more minutes, so you can show what you think is gets you excited. I think. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty simple when you kind of look at like the way that things work on the back end. It's just a few extra routes that are available across it where we're creating doing the create step here. We've also got the delete step. Because like this gives us the option within Runway to where we can do some extra things. So like for on this component now, within our catalog, like we've done some, and hitting some error, probably timed out. Of course, my 2-factor is already done. 1 second. Okay, so if we go back and look at that, and we'll look at the component that we just created. So we've got some additional things that we've done within Runway to allow us to do things. So like we can go to deployment options. We can sync the deployment if it hadn't synced. In this case, we know that it has. If we want to promote it to another environment, so now I can choose like production servers. I can instead choose like a different east or west so that I can have multi-region, things like that. And that's kind of like what this plugin allows us to do. It also allows us to, if I decided that, hey, I don't want this ArgoCD deployed anymore, I can go ahead and go through here and choose any of the deployments that currently exist and just delete them. So it just gives you additional power of things that you can build into your application to better control your ArgoCD deployments. And this is the part that actually really gets us excited, is because now teams can easily decide, hey, I want multi-region, you know, I want to go ahead and go to production. I want some teams are creating additional namespaces in non-prods. They may deploy to the same region, but different namespaces in non-production. Let's say if they have a stage or a test environment in addition to their regular non-prod environment. So we've seen that be a pretty popular option for teams.
Nice. That's really focusing on developer experience. I can totally see that. Folks, do you have any questions on this? I'm interested more in if you'd like in the scaffolder action that you wrote, and how was your experience in writing that, and any feedback on those actions, because personally I believe those are very powerful. So would like to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, that was fine, because we actually have quite a few. Like, we don't have all of our actions open source. So like if you look through here on the actions, we have quite a few. So like we do a lot of Azure management and things like that, to where we're, you know, setting, we do secret pushes into GitHub. We do environment creations within GitHub. We do like various Azure management stuff for service principals, and setting up like role associations for resource groups so that service principals have full control over resource groups and things like that. So like the actions are like, this has just kind of become like a natural thing for us, where we create scaffolder actions pretty often. Whenever we decide, hey, we want teams to have more control on their software templates to be able to do kind of neat things. Like one example, if we look at our fast API template, this wasn't on our demo notes, but just gonna randomly choose some things here to quickly get through. Just choose that one. Oh, let's do East. I don't want to have to create that yet. Just randomly choose some things here. So this is one thing that we're working on right now. So like within our templates, we have the ability to start creating past services within Azure. So you could say, hey, you know, within this subscription, within, you know, this area, you know, non-prod, this region, I want to create a service principal, create a resource group, associate them together, then create a Postgres database and inject the secrets for all of these into my GitHub repo with the actions necessary and the Terraform scripts necessary to have my infrastructure as code ready to go later on, so that teams can then build on it, or maybe do a pull request later on to add additional Terraform and things like that into their repo, so that they have the ability to like tear down and stand up environments at will in like a disaster recovery scenario. So the teams just get that out of the box. They don't have to worry about it. Like, they already have their run books and everything that says, hey, this is how you stand up a brand new environment, and just makes it super simple for them.
I can totally see that. It's amazing. We have a couple of questions in the chat that I would like to draw your attention to. First is from Francesco. How many developers roughly are using Runway, and maybe the templating mechanism, if you know?
A few hundred within American Airlines are using it. So like within Runway, like our inner source community, we have around 70 contributors of people that have either created templates or created plugins. And then separate from that, we've got several hundred that are using them. More people use the plugins than use the templates, but that's pretty rapidly changing as we've started a pretty concerted effort of getting teams to start inner sourcing their templates and things like that they weren't using in Backstage, just because like for years, like teams have had their own little, you know, cruft stuff set up that they were copy pasting. We're now convincing teams to bring it in and to start using the deployment options that Runway already provides to make their life a little bit easier.
Thank you. And a related question from Juan, how many people are maintaining Runway?
So that's a great question. So this has fluctuated. Right now we're at around 8 to 10. By the end of the summer, we'll be at about 16, and that's probably the biggest we'll get for core maintainers. But like I said, our plugins is pretty vast. So like even some of these plugins on the left will have 4 or 5 different teams that are contributing pieces of the plugins. So those, could, like I said, up to about 70 total people that contribute. But most people only contribute, once or twice a month for those that are not on the main team.
Lastly, Victor asks, how long have you been developing Runway? And that's very nice.
Yeah, we've been working on Runway for over a year now. We were one of the early adopters.
That's it from the chat. There are a few comments you should definitely read. Personally, I would like to shout out that you are definitely a mature adopter, and I think the community wants to know more about your experience developing and using Backstage. So hopefully see you at BackstageCon in a few months with one of the talks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tim. This was amazing. You really showed the power of soft templates and a good developer experience. What a good DX can do. So thank you.
Thank you.
If you have more questions for Tim, maybe he is sticking around, so please drop them in the chat and keep the conversation going. But next up, we have Daniel from, I think, VMware. Let me confirm. Dan, are you around?
Hi, yeah.
Hey, the stage is yours, so take it away.
Okay, let me get my screen share. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right, so, okay, hi everyone. Basically, we in VMware, I'm one of the developers for the Tanzu application platform GUI, which is one of our products of the Tanzu offering, and that is used in Backstage as core for the visualization of Kubernetes resources. Mainly our focus on Backstage has been on the Kubernetes side. So recently, one of the challenges we have been facing is the how to enable more granular RBAC access to Kubernetes resources from Backstage. So one of the main ways to authenticate to a Kubernetes cluster from Backstage was using service accounts, right? So basically, as part of your, like in your Backstage instance, as part of your config, you will kind of hard code a service account, which every user that access Backstage will actually use to communicate to the Kubernetes cluster. And for us, this presented some issues because what we would like to be able to do is to restrict the amount of access that certain users within Backstage has to Kubernetes resources. For example, let's say that a group of developers from a particular team, we will only like to enable them to view resources on the components that they actually own. So if we say they only have access to their team namespace in a set of Kubernetes cluster, we would like to enable that. Like if they try to view resources from other components that they don't own, or they like because of some internal policies they shouldn't have access to, then we would like to restrict viewing that. At the moment, this is not possible, like I mentioned before, with the service account authProvider. So we decided to implement a new feature, which is what we call an OIDC authProvider. This feature is very similar to the way the Google authProvider works for the Kubernetes backend plugin, if some of you are familiar with that. But it is a more generic solution, since this is something that any Kubernetes cluster should support. Kubernetes itself has a support for authentication with ID tokens from OIDC providers, and this is what we wanted to bring into the Backstage plugin. As you can see here, the idea is that an user in a properly configured Backstage instance, an user will authenticate with an OIDC provider, and we will use that ID token to authenticate to the Kubernetes API. Okay, so a little bit about the demo setup. So basically, I'm gonna show a Backstage instance that is gonna be configured with one login as an OIDC provider. We're gonna be looking at some objects from a EKS cluster that has been set up also to allow OIDC authentication. We're gonna be looking at mainly two components, an Nginx component, which is gonna have resources in a fake develop and production namespace, and a BCBox component, which is gonna only have components in the develop namespace, and we're gonna be using the special backstage.io Kubernetes namespace annotation to scope the queries to the Kubernetes API. There are going to be two users, an admin and a developer. Admin basically is a cluster administrator, and developer should only have access to resources within the develop namespace. So jumping into the actual Backstage instance, this is a very verbal Backstage instance. I'm gonna sign in. First, I'm going to show you the admin view. All right, so we have our two components. So as I was mentioned before, so the admin basically has access to the resources for the BCBox component, which are in the develop namespace, and it can also list resources for the Nginx component, which has objects in the develop and production namespace. The cool part comes when I log in with the developer account. So I will invite to that. So again, the BCBox component, Kubernetes resources, we can see same thing, develop namespace, 2 pods, 1 deployment. But when we try to view the Nginx component, we are gonna see this error. Why is this happening? Basically, what's happening is the cluster is set up in such a way that this developer user doesn't have a cluster role binding. So it's not gonna be able to list any of the Kubernetes resources at the cluster level. It's only gonna be able to list them at the namespace, at the developed namespace level. So that's why we get this error. Since this is supposed to be a global component in Kubernetes, it can have resources in different namespaces. Once we try to access it, we're not gonna be able to see anything. Ideally, we will be able to see the resources in the namespace that we have access to, and we just won't see any other resources on any other namespace. But this is a particular limitation of the Kubernetes API. So yeah, we are thinking about ways to get around this, but that is gonna be for a little bit in the future. And yeah, if you're curious about the actual setup, I can show you just a little bit. So basically, the idea is we have a the Kubernetes cluster setup, we're going to use authProvider OIDC, and there's going to be a new config option, which is the OIDC token provider that we actually want to use for that cluster, because basically you could have multiple, like on a theoretical scenario, you could have multiple clusters that use different types of OIDC providers. So if a company uses 2 different instances of the same OIDC provider, or different OIDC providers, they could have that properly set up. And once you go into the actual Kubernetes tab, the Kubernetes front-end plugin has been modified to request you the required credentials to be able to access all the clusters. I could quickly show that here as well. If I log in as a guest user, once I try to hit the Kubernetes tab, you will see that it prompts me to actually log in into one login, since that is what our cluster is set up to use. This is basically also the same way that the Google authProvider works. So we took a lot of inspiration from that and just extended to our particular case. So I guess that's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions.
There's one question before that. It's really exciting to see that. Folks always ask about permissions and how open things are in Backstage. So features like this are actually really valuable to so many adopters. Chris asks, does this support all the OIDC token providers that the front-end auth does?
Well, basically, since this is OIDC specific, the only providers that are currently supported out of the box are OneLogin, Okta, Microsoft, and Google. There were a couple of changes recently in the Backstage auth plugin. There are some like generic OIDC API ref were removed, and there are some guidance about, for example, if you use a generic OIDC provider, something like auth0, you will need to take some additional steps to create an auth API ref for those, and to add that to the signing page. Also, you will need to do some extra steps to add that to the Kubernetes front end, so you get this out of the box as well. So it is possible. The changes were implemented in such a way that you can do that, but out of the box, only OneLogin, Okta, Microsoft, and Google.
There's a comment from Timothy about Rancher, which I'm not sure. We use Rancher to log. Timothy, if you're up, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yep. Yeah, I was just saying that like we use Rancher to kind of like lock down access to our Kubernetes clusters for folks based off of AAD group, so that you can still get access to them. So like I know that you said that you weren't like fully able to lock down like only being able to see your own namespaces. So that might be worth looking into the way that it works on the open source Rancher platform to see about enhancing your plugin, because that would be super neat.
Yeah, sure. We'll definitely look at that. The thing is, our offering is trying to target like as many Kubernetes providers as possible. That's kind of why we went originally with this. But yeah, thanks for the heads up.
I have one small question. Since this is a contributor track, I'm always looking for experience in contributing any features on your plugin. So do you have anything to share about your experience contributing this or working on this?
No, I guess it's just echoing the previous comments about the like the easiness of contribution when you actually have access to all the plugins code on the same repo. Again, like I mentioned a couple of times, this is very similar to the way the Google authProvider works. So it was really easy just to look at the way that works in the code and try just to imitate that. Yeah, other than that, not too many things to highlight.
Thank you, Daniel. If you have, folks, if you have any more questions for Daniel, feel free to drop in the chat. We are at the end of the hour. So from Discord, JB, Edu, or if you're here, we can do the demo in the next community session, which is just a reminder that if you go to backstage.io/community, you can find all the information. So community sessions happen every 3rd and 4th Wednesday. Adopters track and contributors track. Adopters track is streamed live on backstage.io/live. And contributors track is this on Zoom for more closer interactions. Just to recap, BackstageCon is happening. Reach out to backstage-marketing@spotify.com to submit a call for proposals or proposals. We have backstage.io/nominate. So feel free to nominate yourself or someone who is doing great in contributing to Backstage. We'd love to know more about them. And lastly, read more about special interest groups, which Francesco shared today. And the first one is Catalog SIG. So that is all for today. Thank you everyone for demoing. See you next time. Bye.